stranger to Bathurst. You would never imagine how this peaceful, rural city transforms itself for one day every year into a hustling, overcrowded, incredibly vital international centre. And how this quiet mountain erupts with a violence that can prove shattering to both men and the machines they drive. But that one important day doesn't happen by accident, or even overnight. Years of skill and learning and 100 different technologies go into it, in all states of Australia and in many countries of the world. For the purpose of this one day on a mountain, 130 miles from the nearest major city, is to improve whatever breed of car that you drive. This day will make your car safer. It will improve its mile-by-mile performance over all spheres of technology, in manufacture itself, in tyres, in the oils and fuel you use, in suspension, in brakes. It will have a long-term effect on your car and the cars that one day your children will drive. And thousands, literally thousands of people from across Australia are involved in the vast organisation that brings this one day to reality.
Well, Ivan, this is our 8th meeting now. It's the final one before the Hardie-Ferodo. A couple of important things here is the public risk insurance come through for the meeting.
Finalised come through about a week ago.
Good. I was up there last week for the final visit, and the circuit's coming up very well. The council are working on all the usual things. We'll find no problem with the circuit. Will be in A1 condition.
Good. The wash away on integral cutting?
Integral cutting, yes, they've attended to that.
Fix that, right?
Yes, there'll be no rain this meeting, so you needn't worry about that.
And what a hell of a morning it was. The rain was just pouring down towards Kelso, and I started to wonder about the future of the weekend.
Our biggest worry today would be if it rains that we don't get an opportunity to test the car with our dry tires.
There's a lot of mud, there's a lot of red tape, a wet track. In fact, even if it rains halfway through the race, that can create a lot of problems, of course, as they're coming in doing, quick tyre changes and so on. But I would like to see a dry day, most definitely. So you never really know until Saturday night just how well the vehicle's going for your race on Sundays.
I think the weather could be a deciding factor.
We're slashing through mud all day long.
I reckon I'll do pretty well.
I don't know which cars are going to run well in the wet and which are not.
I'll back you, Ron.
You've got a good car, but he won't win.
I bring Jellicoe Jack Murray up with me, who actually raced here in an incredible situation in the days when Conrod Strait wasn't sealed.
You know, he sort of talks too much, doesn't he?
1938 was my first effort. The first race they ever had on the circuit. And none of the circuit was sealed in those days.
This is the pit marshal speaking. Don't forget, before the race starts, we want all those tender vehicles.
Number 1 in the grid position is Brock. Number 2 is Bond. 3 is Goss in the Falcon. 4 is Jane. 5 is Hunter. 6 is Holland. 7 is Grice. All of these are in Toranas. Richardson, New Zealand is next. 10 seconds to go, signals the starter. Right. The national flag unfurled. The car 5 seconds. Number 5 from the second row of the grid. John Goss will try and spear through. He makes a pretty good start. Let's watch him though. The field goes towards the start, and he's past Brock, who made a bad start, and is back in fourth spot. Bob Jane on the outside after Colin Bond, but it's Bond first, and then on the outside of the big Falcon going hard was Bobby Jane, but it's the Falcon in second spot. And Bond has a long lead as they go for the first of 163 times up Mountain Straight. And the Falcon of Goss showing its great power there as it goes out after Bond.
Jesus, look at that.
You'd never know that Moffett started so far behind. He is so far
And at the
up.
top of the mountain,
I was, I think, fourth with 3 of those L34s in front, and I had to accept the fact then that we just didn't have the pace to actually do battle with them face to face.
moved up behind Goss, a tremendously good start as he's pulled up to within 1 car of John Goss, who, as you can see, is sitting in 4th position. So Moffett 6th and looking to try and get himself up into 5th place, having started from 15th just half a lap ago.
But already it's noticeable that these two Toranas have got the legs on the rest of the field. In fact, it's all Toranas as they come pouring down the mountain. There's Goss, and he's got Moffett right in his tail so early in the piece.
I got off to a good start. I wanted to pass at least 4 cars in front of me. I had Moffett behind me, and I knew he'd be trying to get past, which he duly did.
Back into the field.
And by corner 2, we'd moved up a 6th position.
Clark Bend.
Not a good place to be in trouble. And meantime, at the head, it's still Bond, the number 2 for the Holden dealer team. Way in front, braking now as he comes down towards Pit Straight. Fast line, he's really flying in this SLR 5000. Colin Bond, a long gap back to Peter Brock.
And into the pits goes Alan Moffett in car number 33. Alan Moffett into the pits now, as in 3rd position. He's got lots of troubles apparently, and
The bonnet up. That's the same engine that they fitted second yesterday. It could be anything at the present stage. There's no point in guessing.
He took his pit crew completely unawares, frantically working inside the motor. In fact, it's been quite a deal of drama here that Murray Carter's car just ahead of Moffett is also in the pit as well. Moffett sitting there looking fairly agitated, obviously. The car is being rocked backwards and forwards to stop the brake linings from binding on.
And the only Falcon running with any chance of success at this stage is car 5, the McLeod Ford entry for John Goss. John Goss still circulating, although he was noticeably down on speed compared to Alan Moffat's car, and in the meantime, while Goss is carrying the Ford flag around the circuit, Alan Moffett is still back in the pits.
well, now Kennedy comes to heavy grease up at the top of the mountain, car number 15.
Oh, he looked a bit shaky too. Well, Kennedy in a lot of strife there, just the shock of the car, having gone into the fence and spun round, plenty of smoke pouring from the front.
John Goss now got a tremendous opportunity to carry the Ford flag all the way home. He's the only one that's got any opportunity now. I think Moffett's race is run to a certain extent. Murray Carter is not in contention. But on the other hand, in such a short time already, Peter Brock is leading this race. He's over 1 minute and 17 seconds ahead of John Goss.
But back in the race, even though he has lost something like a quarter of an hour in the pits, is Alan Moffett in 33. Reaching a speed down Conrod Straight of close to 250 kilometres an hour, around 160 miles an hour. Alan Moffett in the braking area now. 4-wheel discs, specially developed brake materials. Of course, in fact, every car running here must run on the Hardie-Ferodo linings because, as much as a spectacle from the sponsor's point of view, this is a development exercise to improve the quality of brake pads on Australian cars generally.
Brock is into the pits.
Indeed, there's action in the pits as we watch 33. It'll be a sight that will be welcome in the eyes of Alan Moffett, because Peter Brock, the man who is leading the race, has just called into the pits in car 1. So once again, we've got a shuffle on our hands. The board is out for his co-driver Colin Bond, but car 1 is in the pits.
The Alpha Juniors, the GTD body, but powered by only a 1300 motor, which people thought might have been good for Class A, are proving to have a very heavy load to lug around, some 1800 weight with a 1300 motor. And although they have the advantages of 5-speed gearbox and all-disc brakes, they're proving to have nowhere near the pace of the Minis, which are currently leading the class.
And into the pits now, we've got car 2. Colin Bond has come in as well, so both cars are following pretty closely on each other. And as Gary Legg, who is trailing the leader by just that amount of time I mentioned before, goes past, Colin Bond stays in the pits there.
The pit stop going to be terribly critical, and as they watch the other cars go by and realise the extent of the lead, one can't help but wonder whether or not they're going a little bit too fast. Is it necessary for Peter Brock to be going quite so quickly? Colin Bond now back in the race.
And look who's back in the pits again. Another return. Car 33, Alan Moffett, must be becoming a pretty despairing sort of man by now.
Dieter Glimpse is going to get into the car as he puts his helmet on and Moffett clambers out. It'll be a very disappointed Alan Moffett that's climbing out of the car. The 1973 Australian Touring Car Champion who virtually abandoned competing in that championship to pursue the development of this car for this race. And not let Peter Brock win the race, but win the championship, but certainly made it easier for him.
And one can only imagine the thoughts in the minds of Dieter Glimpse, the West German touring car champion, as he goes out for his first racing spell in the big Superbird. Very little practice yesterday in the wet, and now for his first real run around the circuit with this strange big car, and he's in virtually a hopeless position. All the troubles that Alan Moffett had.
Alan, can you tell us in your own words just what went wrong this morning?
We didn't get a fast lap on the track yesterday. That's it in a nutshell. The worst problem we faced at Bathurst. But, we shouldn't be making excuses. We do have an engine that's misfiring on the straight at the moment, and we just can't match the straightaway speeds of the other cars. That's where it's really killing us.
John Goss is still carrying the Ford flag pretty well. He's quite a way back, but he's well placed to do well if something goes wrong with those two leading cars. This will be a race that John Goss would dearly love to win. He's been trying for 5 years, and this is undoubtedly the main race on the Australian calendar. He'd love to knock it off. Gossy, probably the most popular driver competing here today at Mount Panorama. And he's chasing, of course, Colin Bond, going so well, though Colin had a lot of trouble last year, Will.
Yes, with that rollover in the very early laps, it wasn't at all a happy race for him. Although he's been nicely placed so far today, or that doesn't suggest that he might end up nicely placed. Though that wisp of smoke coming from the back of Bond's car.
All these pit stops must be having a very rough effect on the lap scores, keeping check of 60 cars for 163 laps. The results have been fed on the charts and, of course, put through the IBM computer.
Presently in the pits from Class C, the Bainbridge Motors Mazda of Mel Mollison and Bruce Hindhoff. An RX-3 Coupe, it's now made its way out onto the circuit. Bobby Morris is coming into the pits now. Car number 7 lying third outright.
We've got no problem with the economy because we have our smaller size carburetors on, which give us approximately 9 to the gallon. We only have to do 7.5 to get through on 2 pit stops. And I can drive the car flat out, although we are using considerably less revs than what we would in a sprint race. We can corner hard because we have the hard compound tyres, so it's just a matter of coasting along really, pacing the car and just driving it as hard as we can without overexerting it as we possibly would in a sprint race.
It gives us an indication of how many laps Bobby Morris can cover. Bobby Morris would be very, very pleased to come home in front of the dealer team today.
Quite oblivious of all, of course, John Lemper inside is traffic himself in, but he can't get any help from Bob Morris. He can't get through the window.
And out they go, this interesting effort from an XU1.
Activities really increasing in the pits. Farrell now brings the little rotary Mazda in that's been going so well in this class, leading the class so far.
And leading the Manufacturers' Championship in this class, having won its previous 2 rounds of the Manufacturers' Championship in Class C. Very well driven by Tony Farrell and a very quick car indeed.
Rick Reed goes behind the wheel now. Cars being changed. Not greatly worn, but taking the opportunity of changing rubber while the car's in there for the refueling. The rules, of course, specify that only certain types of containers can be used, so it's a fairly slow process. Plenty of time to change wheels. And a quick stop. Rick Reed now at the wheel as the little Mazda goes out. Back onto the track again, still leading in the class.
Oh? Oh dear. Hey, look at this. Oh dear. Oh, bad bloody luck.
Signs of disaster. from the pit of car 7.
I just stepped out of the car the lap before, and everything had been going so well, I couldn't really understand what would have happened, how the car would have deteriorated in one lap.
We don't as yet know what the problem was, but it looks like a real engine cook job, because blue smoke was pouring from that motor when Leffler came into the pits. You can see them now examining the top there. They've added oil to it, but look at it. Whether they can get the car going, we don't know, but it came in with an enormous cloud of smoke. Leffler has gone out. There's still smoke following the car. Into the pits, by the way, car 1 has come in for a second stop. That seems a bit early, but Peter Brock has come back into the pits. Now he's handing over to his co-driver, Brian Sampson, and we'll have the stopwatches out for this session to see what sort of pace Brian Sampson can maintain.
Well, Brian Sampson's underway, but back in the pits we've got a pretty worried-looking Bobby Morris.
Can't really understand why John would be late. Could be many reasons. The obvious thing is mechanical failure. If it's a mechanical failure with the car, well, it's just about the end for us, because we have had one unscheduled pit stop.
In car number 7, the end of a great effort, because they had tremendous faith in the ability of the XU1 to run quickly enough to be up in a major placing at the end, and it certainly, from the way it's gone so far, could have been so.
It looks like terminal engine damage as far as John Leffler is concerned. A car that only lasted a few laps at Bathurst last year, and then it had a terrific record of reliability all through this year, up till now.
Colin Bond's going to make his second pit stop, and for the first time going to have a driver change, so that Bob Skelton will take over the driving of car number 2, which, even although it's one pit stop ahead or behind, whichever way you look at it, it's made one pit stop less than Brock, is still lying in second position to it. But it'll be interesting to see how Sampson and Skelton shape up against each other.
Bear in mind that John Goss is still well placed. John Goss and Kevin Bartlett lost very little time in the pits, and they're poised for success if any trouble afflicts these two cars, or if the co-drivers go too slowly on this central and critical spell.
There's Goss now still in front of Bond, but look at the smoke coming from the tail.
Cole Bond drove past me once, and I stayed ahead of him for 3 or 4 or 5 laps, and eventually I waved Cole past up the mountain, and when he drove past, it was just unreal, the amount of oil that car was dropping.
Turns this corner and goes past the pits. They don't want to lose their car. They've done so well, but there's quite a cloud of smoke coming there. You can see it pouring from the chopped off tail.
So on the outside of pit straight, we've got a real problem if we can get down there with the cameras. That's Alan Moffett suddenly discovering he's barely got a motor, and desperately trying to get his car across the other side of the track and back to his pit group, which he's gone past. He's stopped on the outside, as you can see, of the pit row itself. He can't go back against the race direction of traffic.
Nor is he allowed to cross the line under the threat of possible disqualification. All he can do is get into the back area of the pit.
He can't get a gear at the moment.
And Alan Moffett couldn't have picked a worse place. It's like breaking down in the middle of Pit Street in the P car.
He's got a gear, and away he goes.
Yes, he's had to stop the engine, obviously, to select a gear.
We've got Alan Moffett, by the way, coming very slowly down the straight. We'll be calling him to the pits this time with his clutch problem or whatever it may be.
The race which held so much promise for Alan Moffett, developing into something of a nightmare. Need a glimpse of crowding around the mechanics to try and find out what the latest problem is.
And the news from the Moffett pit is that he has withdrawn from the race. So a most disappointing end for the man who tried hardest to win this race.
I lost the gears here on the pit straight, and I thought, well, I'll attempt to drive it without the synchro mesh, but didn't like that for long either.
Well, bad luck, Alan. It was a tremendous drive.
We did everything we could, and you can't expect any more.
Alan Moffett has known the exultation of tremendous success, and now he's experiencing the depths of disappointment.
The picture of a man who's seeing $100,000 go down the drain.
And talking of things going down the drain, look at the smoke issuing from the tail of the leader. Now this is the Peter Brock Brian Sampson car, and the picture tells the story. The disaster that people thought might happen appears to have afflicted car 1.
So what's going to happen with Peter Brock's car smoking like fury, Colin Bond in the pit, Bob Forbes looking as though he might suddenly inherit first place, John Goss looking as though he might jump from fourth to second, and Brock is in far more trouble than ever Colin Bond has been in. That's pouring out his exhaust pipe.
Well, if Harry Firth can get the car going again, it'll be a triumph for a man who admittedly has wrought
It was the second time I was actually in the pits. Peter came in with his motor smoking very badly, and I would have loved to have gone out and won the race for sure, because, you know, Peter at that stage of the game was really had it home and hosed.
Peter Brock waits in the car while the mechanics try to see what's wrong. Look at the face. Tells the disappointment. He's won the National Touring Car title this year, but the big race of the year is Bathurst. And Bathurst has gone.
And the crowd is starting to cheer and to go mad. The 20-deep crowd on pit straight waving their arms in unison as John Goss last pass.
And it's Forbes and Negus now in 4 in second spot. The things are really changing here. Fairly dry down the bottom, but our cameras up top show it's pouring with rain at the top of the circuit, and things are hazardous.
Just aquaplaned across the road along the curve past McPhillamy Park and bumped into the bank bloody heavily. It just rammed into the earth bank, and it got sort of caught in the gutter, and with that blown right front tyre, I just couldn't get it to come back onto the road, and it took about 500 or 600 yards at very high speed to coax it back onto the road. And I kept saying to myself over and over again, you're going too fast, you've got to lose more speed. And in the end, I just seemed to be walking the car down towards Forest Elbow. The magnesium wheel started to break up under the car, and I could hear fragments banging up under the chassis, so I waited for a break in the traffic and drove across to the right-hand side of Mountain Straight and put that damaged wheel on the grass and drove it all the way down on the grass to save it from breaking up.
Loose tyre flapping on the alloy wheel. Goss going pretty quickly too as he comes into the pit area. Slows down, there'll be a change of wheel and probably a change of rubber here because it's raining now on so much of the circuit that he may take this opportunity to change from the dry weather rubber, which must have made the car as big as this almost uncontrollable at the top, onto wet weather gear. And in fact, what turned out to be something of a disaster, or seemed to be a disaster, may turn out to be a winning advantage. Because
I still wasn't aware of the density of the rain. I drove into the pits and stopped, and I called for some more engine oil, and the Bridgestone engineer came to the window, and Barry said to me, wets or dries? And firstly I said dries, and I still wasn't aware of how much rain we're getting. And he said, are you sure? And I looked across and saw Alan Moffett standing about 10 or 12 feet away, and my thoughts went back to 1972 when he was in a similar situation and tired and not able to make a decision, and I'd gone to his window and helped him, and I called Alan over. I said, what do you think? He said, put the wets on and I'll take you to the end of the race.
a sad sight for the Holden Deal team as car 1 heads for the back of the pit, so Peter Brock is out of the race.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. 18 cars in the pits at the moment, but they're still coming.
Alan Moffett out of the race, but still joining in the spirit of the things as he tries to get help for John Goss to get him out there, because Forbes and Negus are closing bit by bit. Colin Bond well back now, running around 5th, but still trying terribly hard. Never gives up, does Colin Bond.
Bob Forbes going past him to also call into the pits and therefore go on to wet weather rubber. And in the meantime, Goss has just about finished that changeover, so he's out now, whilst most of his sparring companions, his opposition, are coming in to do what he's just been forced to do.
And things are so wet here, Mount Panorama. Bad down the bottom of the circuit, but diabolical up the top. Water is streaming across the track there and suddenly presenting cars with a glyphating surface.
I thought for a start, because it was only rain on top of the mountain, that it might, be worthwhile staying on slicks. So I did 3 or 4 laps on them, but all of a sudden there was a torrential downpour on the top of the mountain and many cars were going off into the arm car. And I took the best part of Valor and decided to come in and change onto wets.
Meanwhile, in the pits, Kevin Bartlett is all rigged up, ready to go, so they're about to make their last pit stop.
Rain had slowed the race, and where we'd hoped to finish it in 3 hours, I had to come in and hand over to Kevin. The fact that we'd had to stop, it was the privately entered Torana of Bob Forbes and Wayne Negus that came into contention. According to our chart, we were still 1 lap ahead, but we couldn't afford to take the risk.
KB, as he's affectionately known, started racing in Morris Minors, and has driven lots of cars since then, and one of those men who are speed happy, who are delighted to have a drive of something as long as it goes hard and he can give it plenty.
But I thought that was a pretty quick stop. 50 seconds, less than a minute.
Tremendous parochialism here among the Ford and Holden teams, trying to push their own particular car home. More than 30,000 spectators around this rain-sodden course.
Car with headlights, car 4. Here he comes now. He's in hot pursuit, and Bob Forbes is flying. If the track's wet, he's trying to ignore it. And the gap between them is down to 7.2 seconds. So he's certainly catching him. We've never had a finish like this at Bathurst, and in the lead is Kevin Bartlett, the old hand of racing. So badly injured earlier this year in a race at New Zealand. Who would have thought he'd have recovered from those terrible injuries to be in a car leading Bathurst in the closing laps of this race? And what exciting laps. Oh, talking of excitement, things still happening, cars spinning on the circuit here. It's the Don Holland car, and all spinning. It's definitely a slow up by Forbes. The front wheel looks as though it's got a bit of mud on. He's either spun or hit something.
Going into the cutting, I left my braking too late. I was trying very, very hard, and instead of trying to make the corner, I just went straight ahead up a little track, and then I had to back out and get going again.
Rod McRae, although I can't see any sign of McRae's car around the course. He's number 20. We've lost him somewhere.
And in fact, the most fearsome crash was McRae aquaplaned apparently off Conrod Straight, cleaned up trees and demolished his motor car. There it is. 1 lap to go. 6.2 kilometres.
And Forbes still in pursuit, car 4. Been a gallant effort. Had a spin or something which slowed him down. He's dropped back a little bit. And Kevin Bartlett only has to finish now to win the most prized race in all of Australia. A unique event.
A marvellous challenge from Forbes and a tremendously well-judged, well-driven, well-prepared race by Goss, by Bartlett and by their team manager, Max McLeod. Forbes in full flight for the final time on Conrod Straight. A great effort.
It is Kevin Bartlett who takes the checkered flag to win the 1954 Hardie-Ferodo 1000 for John Goss, and it's an elated John Goss in the pit who at last has won the Hardie-Ferodo 1000.
But in reflection, I guess any of the guys, Peter Brock, Alan Moffett, Colin Bond, tell you what it meant to win the big one. But then I wondered if I'd contributed something to the development of the Australian car. This was my moment, and I loved every second of it.
And let me now hand over to the general manager of Hardie-Ferodo, the company who have the courage to turn on this race as a practical demonstration of their own product, Mr. George Hibbert. Congratulations, Hibbert.
Thanks a lot.
Also, to John Goss, our great favourite.
Thank you, George.
Congratulations, Johnny. We've had a long time to have you up here.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Mr. George. Mr. George Hibbert. You know, we should have won today. We've had five years of training.